The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. Jesus said to his disciples, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He takes away every branch in me that does not bear fruit, and every one that does he prunes, so it bears more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word that I spoke to you. Remain in me as I remain in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me will be thrown out like a branch and wither. People will gather them and throw them into the fire, and they will be burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and be my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord. You called, you shouted, you shattered my deafness. You shone with dazzling light and dispelled my blindness. You were fragrant, and I breathed you in deeply, and now I am breathless, longing for you. I tasted you, and now I hunger and thirst for you. You touched me, and now I burn with a desire for you. If you know me, you know that I love these words. I quote them often. They're from St. Augustine, and he wrote them in his Confessions. And I love them because I think they so eloquently capture, well, what was going on. How Augustine was searching for Christ, and at the same time, Christ was searching and seeking Augustine. And he was using everything at his disposal, even right down to Augustine's own senses. And at some point in time, Augustine comes to this realization, and all of a sudden, a search comes to an end. A heart, a restless heart, finds its peace. And we hear how eloquently that happens in these words he writes. Still, I like these words because they remind me, in a real way, that Christ is doing the very same thing right now with us. Through the Mass, Christ is affecting all of our senses so that we might know and feel his presence right here, right now. Certainly that's something Paul experienced and realized, because what else would have moved him to do what he did, that we hear him doing today in the Acts of the Apostles, to go out and be with the disciples in Jerusalem? What would have caused him to go seek out the very people he was persecuting? A warm welcome? Surely not. Moreover, what would have caused him to go to Jerusalem at risk to his own life, to go back to the very people who told him to persecute? Certainly not a warm welcome there either. No, it was the realization of the risen Christ in his midst that caused him to do what he did. And it had to be the same for the early church, that church that was in disarray after the crucifixion, that church that was holed up in a locked room in Jerusalem, that church that was paralyzed by fear and doubt. No, they could only do what they did, an about face, if they had they realized the realization that the risen Christ was in their midst. That's the only reason, that's the only explanation. Christ was with them, and so they could move out, grow, add numbers, and be at peace. That's what we hear today also in Acts. Yes, the presence of Christ, the realization of the risen Christ in their midst, did all these things. And it's the same for us now. Christ is in our midst. That's what the singing of the Alleluia, the light from the Easter candle, the fragrance of incense, the sprinkling of holy water is trying to impress upon us, that the light of the world, the good shepherd, the bread that has come down from heaven, the true vine is in our midst right here. And if we realize this, well, this is something that we would seek out constantly and want to remain in its presence. And Christ tells us we can. We can remain in his presence. He can remain in us if we keep his word. Yes, if we keep his word, he will remain in us, and we will bear good fruit. But friends, keeping the word of Christ isn't a simple act of memorization or of just listening. We know it's much more than that. Keeping the words of Christ is really about allowing those words to prune us, if you will, so that they not only enlighten, but they also shape and transform us into the people that we are meant to be, disciples. Disciples who go out and bear fruit, who do works and not just speech and words, people who act in deed and truth. But this is something that we're not apt to do. We're not inclined to surrender ourselves completely to someone or something else. Rather, we're inclined to hold a portion of ourselves back. And in this case, we're inclined to hold a portion of ourselves back from Christ. Why? Well, because we don't want to be totally shaped by him. We don't want to be completely pruned by him. He can have a portion of us, but we want to have a little portion for ourselves. Why? Because maybe we know better. We think we know better. Or we just want to have the freedom to do what we want when we want it, so that we can hold a grudge and have no problems with that. We can lie, we can cheat, we can gossip, we can do whatever we want because, well, we're free to do so. And that's what we do. We give some of ourselves over, but we hold some back. And we think that this is all very fine and well. But friends, there is a consequence to all of this. And what is that? Well, this all leads to a static discipleship. It is not growing. It is not being lived out in a fuller way. It is not coming to a greater appreciation of what it believes. It does not engage the world or those around it. No, it's just there, static, not growing, just there. And if that is what discipleship is, well, then it's very much like what we hear in the gospel today. It's like a branch that needs to be cut down, cut off, and thrown away, because it really is lifeless. If we do anything this week, let it be that we ponder how we might better keep the words of Christ in our lives, how we can allow those words to affect more than just a portion of us or what we're allowing to give over. No, let us stop and think how it can affect all of us in our entirety, how those words can prune us, shape and transform us to live a dynamic discipleship, one that is engaging the world, one that is constantly praying, thinking, teaching, serving the true vine grower, our Father in heaven. Indeed, that is what he wants, a discipleship that engages the world, one that is like that early church that grows, adds numbers and adds peace, one that is like St. Paul, acting and boldly speaking out on his behalf. Indeed, let us do all of that so that might come to fruition, but let us also do this so that we might remain in him, so that one day we might be like Augustine and come to that realization as he did and speak those words because, well, they are our words as well. You called, you shouted, you shattered my deafness. You shone with dazzling light and dispelled my blindness. You were fragrant, and I breathed you in deeply, and now I am breathless with longing for you. I tasted you, and now I hunger and thirst for you. You touched me, and now I burn with a desire for you.